Welcome back. My name is April Gallant. I'm the curator of prints, drawings, and photographs at the Smith College Museum of Art. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and are refreshed for our afternoon program. A conversation on the art of collecting, moderated by Jane Turner, who we are proud to claim as a Smith alum, and who I now have the pleasure of introducing. Jane Turner is the head of the print room at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. An internationally renowned art historian and specialist in Dutch 16th and 17th century drawings, she is also the editor of the New York journal Master Drawings, the most important journal in the field. Having studied art history at Smith College and the Institute of Fine Arts at New York University, Jane began her career at the Pierpont Morgan Library in New York, where she was one of the 3 authors of the permanent catalog of Netherlandish and Flemish drawings in 1991, and the main author of their catalog of Dutch drawings published in 2006. She developed her extensive knowledge and demonstrated her excellent organizational skills as editor of the 34-volume art encyclopedia, The Dictionary of Art. Jane continues in her job as editor with the journal Master Drawings, based at the Morgan Library and Museum in New York, in addition to her job at the Rijksmuseum. Please join me in welcoming Jane Turner, who will introduce her fellow panelists.
Thank you, April. I'm doing much shorter, more informal, one-line bios for my fellow panelists. What is interesting, I think, in both cases, I am a product of Smith College, art history, and there you are. Neither one of my fellow distinguished panelists studied art history, so it goes to show you that you can have a very successful career in the art world without having a Smith College education under your belt. Andrew Robison studied philosophy and theology and joined the National Gallery of Art in 1973. And I think, without wishing to insult him in any way, I think you are the doyen of American curators of print rooms at this stage in your career. Mark Brady began his career at Sotheby's in the Impressionist and Old Master Drawings department. He then went on to found the Old Master Drawings department in New York at Konagi's, and in 1987 decided he wanted to be his own boss and founded his own gallery. Join me in welcoming both Mark and Andrew. To some extent, our job has been made much easier by the excellent talks we had this morning, and many of the points that will be bouncing around, and I hope that to encourage you to ask questions at the end, and even if you want to raise your hand and stop us in the middle. If we start with Suzanne's talk, she described some very different ways that private collectors have worked in partnership with the Art Institute of Chicago. And each collector seems to have his or her own vision and strategy how to go about it. If we take the example of the collector who formed the exhibition, the collection of drawings on exhibition here, she's worked much more independently. She has spread her generosity to a far larger number of institutions, of which I think we are all generous recipients, from Smith College to the National Gallery of Art to the Morgan Library to Cornell, Fitzwilliam Museum, the British Museum, the Rijksmuseum. The list is endless. But what I'd like to ask my panelists to start with is for each of you to describe how each of you would characterize the personality of the collection on view here. Mark? Mark, do you want to start?
Oh, sure. The personality of the collector, well, it's an unusual person in the sense that she has an understanding of, an instinctive understanding of a work of art, and a sort of extra quality, which is very hard to find in all of collectors. She has an instinctive taste for works of art. This is rarer than almost anyone here would imagine, I think. And I think that when you look at the exhibition, you will see that in this tremendous collection of drawings, there's no slip in taste, which is, I mean, almost unparalleled in contemporary collecting, I think. This is one way I'd categorize the collection. The other thing is a tremendous individuality of response to a work of art. It is a collection that's formed entirely by the personality of the collector. It has no committee input. She does not the sort of person who solicits several opinions before making a decision for an acquisition. And I think this marks the personal quality of the collection. I mean, this is not an institutional collection that by any means, this is not a collection that reflects anything but the personality of the collector. This is also unusual these days, I think. And that's what I would start with.
I think that's very good. The personal aspect of the collection comes out very strongly. I mean, almost any collection is going to have a certain personal aspect, but this is particularly strong. And I think that the thing to remember in reviewing this exhibition is also to remember other drawings which were in the other exhibition, which has the catalog, that the collection contains beautifully succulent, elegant works of art, but also has very tough works of art. And so the fact that the later German drawings from the later 19th and 20th century haven't been included, or the Dutch and Flemish drawings, gives you perhaps the concentration on Italian and French drawings gives you one kind of sense of the collection, but the collection is very much balanced with these much stronger drawings, more unusual drawings. And then when you review that and you go back to the beginning again and you look at things like those Bandinellis, then you see this extraordinary strength. I think the collection is in terms of its personality, has such a variety of emotion and such a variety of type, mostly figurative, relatively fewer landscapes, but I want to stress the fact that the collection contains very strong, bold, powerful drawings, as well as the softer, more Renaissance or Baroque kind of Italian drawing. The second thing is, which I think is obvious and which was already said last night, is that in approaching old master drawings or old master paintings or old master sculpture, one has to, if you're talking about European works of art, the overwhelming number of works of art made, say, before 1800 are going to be religious. And if you don't have a serious religious background, or if you don't have some serious religious vibrations, let's put it that way, how can you understand that Bronzino? And how can you understand that Fra Bartolomeo? I mean, these are things, or that Tiepolo, Annunciation. These are works of art which were made at a time and by people who had a belief system which helped inform how they approached their subject and how they executed their subject. And I think that you can be, what was it, atheista? You can be an atheist and still appreciate these works, but you have to have some sense of a religious background to appreciate so many of the works in the exhibition. And if you do, then I think they sing with an even stronger voice. I think the personality of the collection, quality is the main thing, no question. Variety, and not only variety of artists, centuries, schools, but variety of emotion. But I think there is one leitmotif. There are many, but that I think is a very strong one and worth stressing about this collection as opposed to others.
And that spirituality can come across in something like the little moonlit landscape, a nocturnal landscape. It doesn't have to be
absolutely.
Friedrich. No. Doesn't have to be a religious subject as such.
No, no, no. And I think even, you know, in supposedly secular works, like a Nibble's tree,
Yeah.
I mean, after all, we're talking about a period when creation meant something. It was a creation. And seeing the life force in that tree, you know, takes you back to also theological reflections.
Our topic today is supposed to be to address the broad subject of the art of collecting, and there are many very distinguished collectors sitting in the audience today, for whom we don't need to spell out how you do it, but what we also want to do is to encourage others, and for those who might find it still a little bit intimidating, how do you start to collect drawings? And how do you get to know curators and work with them the way Suzanne works with her curators at Chicago or with a dealer? So I'd like each of you to address the question of, as a dealer, how do you work with collectors? And as a curator, how do you work with collectors? And I know that there'll be a broad range in different types of collectors. But if you could start, Mark.
Well, I don't know, it's sort of awful, but I mean, you know, say, how do you collect drawings? I mean, you actually have to start buying them. I mean, that's...
Well, they also have to come in your front door and...
Yes, and that's the awkward...
And not be intimidated.
Yes, well, you can do that. It's not very intimidating that way, but I mean, sometimes it can be. You really, that is, I think the most important thing is that the person who really wants to be a collector and who is a born collector or who has that instinct is the sort of person who does start to buy things. Dreadful as that may sound, but I mean, whether they started collecting stamps as a child or whether they, you know, made other kinds of, you know, mineral collections or something like that, that's often how that sort of instinct is developed early. What's fatal is to constantly go to these exhibitions or to the auctions and to look at things and to return the next year and to look at more things and to return the third year and the fourth year and the fifth year and the sixth year and the eighth year and not have bought something. You're not a collector at that point. You actually have to take that terrible risk of putting,
plunge.
You know, a check down and buying. I think that's also apropos the current collector. There's this sense of the actual, the sort of taking that action, and that has I mean, this is a remarkable number of drawings to have collected in the space of 15 or so years, I think, I mean, especially at this time. But there's a conviction behind this personality that says, I like it, I love it, I'll take it, I want it, you know, I must have that drawing, that's a beautiful drawing. And that's how true great collections are formed. How you work with a person subsequent to that, or even just up to that point, because of course only the most intrepid people, you know, will buy something the first time they look at an exhibition, is that you do talk to the curators in your world, you talk to the dealers in your world, you talk to the person at the auction house whose exhibition has been mounted and whose sale is on. And that, I don't think, is necessarily a terribly fearful thing to do, because I think generally, it may have been in the 40s and 50s and 60s, but I think now there's been such an openness to collecting, at least in America and in England and even in France a bit, that people feel much more comfortable discussing, you know, the vulgar idea of buying something, you know, and asking for information, and information has become so much more readily available to everyone because of the tremendous scholarship done since the war and because of the internet, of course, and that I think people expect, I mean, dealers certainly do, and I think auction house people do, and certainly curators do. They expect to be asked questions.